Hello, this is Carl Seidel in the People's View, and today we're going to do interview with David Schoneman, who's a candidate for our representative from Ward 3.
That's right. Thanks, Carl. Thanks for having me in.
Mm-hmm. And how's a candidate running? Why are you running for that office?
Well, I think that I've served in government before. I was a Ward 3 alderman here in the city of Nashua, and I think that it's important to serve when we have the chance. I believe in representative government. I think it's important that we don't bring our own agendas, but that we represent what the folks want as we head up into these various offices. And the thing that has really got me going this year is the feedback I'm getting from people who say that they're really feeling the pressure from living in America these days. It's not this, we don't get this sense of freedom and easygoing lifestyle that we've had in the past. We have government overreach. I think we think about mask mandates and vaccine mandates. A lot of the folks here in town were very upset with the continued mask mandates that existed in schools during the whole COVID response. And we saw that much of the COVID response was really overstepping bounds and caused more harm than the good that it brought. So people are feeling the pressure of government overreach. I think they're also feeling the pressure of financial burdens that are taking the form of two things, really: increased taxes and inflation. And these things are really causing a lot of pain. And some of the folks who would traditionally be in the middle, they're independents, moderates, they're thinking, sometimes I vote Republican, sometimes I vote Democrat, and maybe more often than not, they swing to the Democrat side, because they want to portray themselves, the Democrats do, as being a party of liberty. And I think what folks in the middle are discovering is that the Democrats are not the party of free will and liberty. The name liberal is a little misleading because it implies that this is the party of freedom, but it's really the party of socialism. And
what's that mean? That means control.
It means control. It's the party of control, and it's control of the people for the benefit of those elite leaders. You see people like John Kerry, who speaks about climate change, and he flies around in a private jet. That's very inefficient and a lot of pollution for just one passenger. He'd be much better off driving his car or going on a commercial airliner with 200 of his friends. But he doesn't like doing that. But he wants us to limit our carbon footprint while he expands his. That's the kind of thing that happens, and it happens all over. We saw President Biden jet down to Delaware so that he could vote in person, where he talks about the benefit of absentee ballot voting. So why didn't he do that? Again, he wants us to have one set of behaviors, and him and his pals have a different set of behaviors. And it's harder and harder to hide that. And I think that the folks at home are understanding it. They're seeing that what they're saying we should do, they're not doing themselves. The costs that we have to incur, they're somewhat insulated from, because I'm not convinced that they work for their money. They just take their money. And when they don't take their money, they take our money. So I worked for a government contractor one time, and I can tell you a story about government contracting expenses. And the way it works is it was a cost plus contract. So it didn't matter what the company spent, because the amount that got billed to the government was whatever we spent plus some percentage, some override, whatever it was. So really, the more you spent, the more you got. And that's not real life. And I think government operates that way. Now, I'm not saying that's a wrong way for a defense contractor to work, because they're doing things that the country needs. But when I'm just using that as an example of how government thinks. They don't care about the expenses because they can just get more of your money. And the folks at home can't do that. We can't just magically go out and get more money. We have to take a second job, or in some cases, folks are taking a third job, and it's very difficult. So we're feeling the effects of inflation. We're feeling the effects of increased taxes. And where's it all going? It's going for just big spending, and the big spending not only does it increase our taxes, but it contributes to the inflationary pressure in our economy. The more money, because they're not getting more, they're just basically printing more and distributing more.
Right.
They're printing it with a printing press, but they're also printing it just with finance. They're spending more. They're able to spend beyond their means. And as they spend more, we call that printing money. That money flows out into the economy with no production associated with it, and that extra cash in the economy, extra currency in the economy, money in the economy is what's fueling, one of the factors that's fueling the inflation that we're feeling. So the folks at home can't print more money, and the folks at home get stuck, and it hurts, and that's what I'm seeing is happening. And I don't want the country to. I don't want us to be on this runaway roller coaster. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable, and that's the main reason I'm running.
I think since it's so big, people feel we can't fail, and we could fail. And you don't want to be a Zambezi or a Venezuela or I was hearing about Argentina, how they went down the tubes.
Yeah, Venezuela is, it's not that far away. It's just a South American neighbor, and it was the strongest economy in South America, and now it's an absolute disaster. And what happens when you get this what does it mean to be a disaster? It means that there's no food. It means that money is absolutely worthless, and there's no future and no hope. And we have a son at home. Our 5-year-old son Isaac will be 6 next month. I don't want him growing up in a state or a country like America without that sense of hope. That's very, very important. I think that people, our neighbors and friends who are raising kids and sending them to schools and trying to give them a better life than they have, like every generation for the last several generations in America has tried to do, is becoming harder and harder. We worry about the life that Isaac, in this case, is going to have. Is he going to have a hope in a future? Is he going to have opportunities, or is he just going to be pigeonholed and told what he can do and cannot do? I want to fight for him, and I think most parents want to fight for their kids. So I want to fight for his future, and I would encourage people to take some control back and think about their vote. Think about what kind of future your candidate is presenting. Are they presenting a future where we need more mandates, where we need more masks, everybody needs vaccine, we have a one-size-fits-all school, we need more taxes, we're going to distribute more free stuff, we're going to let more illegal immigrants into your neighborhood? Or do you want a future where you have a hope? Where you have great job opportunities, good educational opportunities, where you actually put something into your savings account, not continually draw out. Because if we continually draw out of our savings account, it's going to dry up. That's what's going to happen. But we want to be able to put money in there so that as our kids age and as folks head into retirement, that there's something there that's left, rather than just turn us into dependents.
And you want to do things that you enjoy. You're not what you have to do.
Right.
And having somebody tell you that this is good for you, that's not the way we act here in the United States.
No, someone once said, and I thought it was good, freedom. What's the definition of freedom?
Right.
And freedom, I think, is the ability to make a choice and then either enjoy the benefit or suffer the consequences. But if we're not allowed to enjoy the benefit, because let's say we work hard and all our money is gone in taxes, or we do things and we're bailed out, do things that we shouldn't have done, or maybe learn a lesson from, and we get bailed out. We take away consequences, good and bad. And what happens then is that the choice that we made that led us to that point was really meaningless. If we make a good decision, but we're not allowed to enjoy the benefit, if we make a bad decision and we don't suffer the consequences, that decision becomes meaningless. And if that decision becomes meaningless, we're not free.
Right.
So it's very important, I think, that my son Isaac has freedom. And it doesn't mean license to do stupid stuff. Some people interpret freedom as the ability to make a decision without consequences. I can do this and not get hurt because I'm free. No, that's not how it works.
That's what's working now in certain cities, isn't it?
Well, yes. And I think about what President Biden is trying to do with this student loan forgiveness.
Right.
That debt doesn't magically go away.
Right.
Because those schools have been paid.
Right.
This tuition that these kids borrowed for, that's money has been paid. Those schools, those teachers, those dormitories, whatever it is, those book vendors, they're not giving that money back. That money is spent. So if the student who incurred that debt is not going to pay for it, where's that going to come from? Well, Biden won't answer that question. It's going to come from taxpayers. It has to. Or they're just going to print more money. And print more money, of course, we said before, leads to inflation. So there are folks who, and Biden's tempting them, saying, you can make a bad decision, I'll bail you out.
Right.
He's tempting them with that lack of economy in order to buy a vote.
And that's not the only example he's
It's
doing
not the
that.
only example. There are plenty of others. But we want to have freedom. And I think to be free, we have to be able to make decisions that actually have consequences. Otherwise, that decision is meaningless and you're not free. And that's what happens in socialist countries. I mean, they want to take away that freedom, that ability. And, you know, if someone has a dream and plans out how to achieve that dream, but then you make their choices and their pursuit of that dream meaningless, look what you've robbed that person of. You've robbed that person of the ability to follow their dream, because now it's meaningless. And that's a horrible thing to do to a human being. Human beings need to have challenges. They need to. We're all entrepreneurial. We think of it in economic sense of scraping together a few bucks and investing in business. That's all true. But every one of us is entrepreneurial because we scrape together whatever we have, whether that's our time or our talents or whatever it is, and we invest it in the life that we have, because nothing's unlimited. So we take our limited resources and we do something with it based on our good decisions. That's entrepreneurship. And it applies in an economy, but it also applies to the way we raise our family and make all of our decisions. It's an entrepreneurial mindset that all human beings have. Whether you live in the jungle or you live in a Manhattan high-rise, this is how we're wired. And when we take away that benefit, we're taking away that choice, and we're robbing people of the ability to pursue a dream. We're robbing them of who they are in their essence. And if people are ever going to feel like they're pushed into a corner and burdened and put upon by government or society or something, it's because we're being robbed of what it is to be human.
And it's sort of working from the top on down. I mean, it doesn't, you have the whole United States under certain problems, and then you get cities, and then you have the smaller cities. They're all turning that way, where they're being controlled to an extent that they don't have the freedom you're talking about.
Right.
And the people don't realize it.
Right. And freedom is demonized. I think about school, because of our son. We're homeschooling him. We have the freedom to do that. We can do that. We have a consequence for that because, Shannon stays home. We don't have a second income. We can use a second income. But there are benefits too. I see him during the day. I work out of the home. I have a small business owner. I work out of my home. And so I can have a chance to see him more. So there's pluses and minuses. But the left, the side that touts freedom and liberty, is trying to control where your child goes to school. They don't want you to have options. They don't want parents to be able to send their kids to a private school or a public school or a public charter school or a homeschool or whatever else it might be. Within each of those categories, there's a lot of choices. But they don't like that, because they want to protect. They want that money to come from you, from all the taxpayers, into their pockets and their pockets only. And that's very unfair. It's unfair to all the taxpayers, certainly unfair to the parents, and it's a great disservice to those children. So educational choice and freedom, again, to make those decisions and send your kid where you want him to go. Not based just on what city or town you live in, but what you want it for your child.
And they don't make it easy for the voters to get their opinions heard on what's happening either in the school or in other service facilities.
That's right.
I mean, how else can they learn what they need to do to make the people happy? if they don't want to listen.
Well, that's a good point, and we saw that in Nashua. Now, when I was on the Board of Aldermen, all the meetings had public comment before and public comment at the end of the meeting. And some of the meetings, they went a long time. And public comment came at the end of a long meeting when we were tired. But one of the things I liked best about those meetings was listening to what people had to say. I thought it was great. But now the city of Nashua and many other municipalities here in New Hampshire and across the country have limited public comment. That's because these elitist leaders don't want to hear it.
Right.
They don't want to hear it. People are upset, and they want to have their voices heard. They want to ask questions that can be answered. They want government to be accountable. And as much as some of these folks in government talk about they're going to have the most open, most transparent administration ever, we heard that here in Nashua. It's not working out that way because, in fact, they don't want to hear. They just want you to sit down and listen to what they have to say.
And some places are trying to label you as a educational terrorist or something
I
like
know.
that.
That's right. Label parents.
They use negative everything.
Right.
And even some places that are doing that CRT, that's all negative.
Yes.
They're getting people to hate each other. How do you sell that?
Well, why would someone do that? I think one of the plays from the book of, or the recipe book of socialism is to divide the population, divide the population into as many small groups as you can. And so that's what you see the left doing. You see them dividing, because if they're divided and they see enemies in their neighbors, then they're not very likely to join together.
Right.
Really looking at what they have in common, which is much more than what they may have in differences. But that's part of the strategy, is to divide the population. And I think that Biden talked about he was going to unify everybody, right?
Right.
He hasn't done that at all. Look what he's doing. He's demonizing all the Trump supporters. You know how many millions of people voted for Trump? There were a lot of people voted for Trump. Now they're all terrorists. And he demonizes folks in an effort to split people apart. And the whole issue of, or the habit of calling Americans from different backgrounds a hyphenated American.
Right.
You're African American, you're Hispanic American, you're a European American, you're, whatever, Native American, whatever it might be. It's not to unify people.
No.
It's to divide them. It's to divide them. And I would encourage folks at home to not let them divide us. Let's not do it. They don't want us to be united. But we can be, and we should be. We're neighbors. And when this election comes up this fall, I'm hoping that people will think about that and vote for a unifying presence in government, which will enable folks which will allow folks to have freedom to make their decisions.
We're beginning to see a little bit of that show up. We had a couple of people who are new to the United States. They're citizens now, but they came from a country that was ruled that way. And they ran very good. Lily Tang is one of them that I've met and interviewed here. She's very, very emotional about that, because she came from a country where she could have been one of the possibly elites, but it wasn't really. She became a lawyer in China, and then she came here and got an advanced degree in law and found somebody, married, raised a family, and then ran for election in a federal election.
That's great. And I think that the story those folks have, people like her, would really be eye-opening for most Americans to hear. Because while the Democrat Party there's certain forces in the Democrat Party, factions, which really control all the moderates, because there's all this marching in lockstep. They're moving us towards socialism. And you get a person like Lily Tang Williams, who came out of socialism and communism in China and is seeing what we have here and seeing where we're going, and then doesn't want us to go there, so she steps in to run for office. I think it's remarkable, and she would have quite a story to tell, because it's not the utopia that that Marx and others wanted us to think it was, and Marx and Biden and Pelosi and others, all of them in the same category, want us to think that it is not a utopia. It's slavery. It's the loss of human dignity. It's the loss of individualism, and it's an oppressive burden to have to bear.
I think it's coming more public in China now too, because you're seeing their tightness of the lockdown on this on the COVID virus that they have over there, and it is restricting their whole economy.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And
they're just shutting them down.
And shutting them down physically by sealing their doors on some places.
Yeah, we don't want to see that here. It was bad during the COVID reaction. The overreaction, I would call it, was bad. It seems to be, in some ways, in the distant past now, because we're not wearing masks anymore. We're not worried about social distancing. We're not doing any of that anymore, because I think that that was really harnessed in order to influence the 2020 election. That's what that was all. That was a political. It was a political theater to influence the 2020 election. And now that that's passed, and I think that the fallout from that is hurting the Democrats who perpetrated that effort in 2020. We don't want that anymore.
Well, I wonder how much that's happening now was really even intended by them. I think it's gotten a little bit out of control, because it's affecting this production line that people need. The material isn't coming from China as fast as it should. Things aren't available. The whole world, I guess you might say, is really looking for a much better environment, because it's affecting us all with the increase in prices and the lack of supplies.
That's right. An economy, a world economy like we have, is just this very complex dance of supply and demand. Supply gets too big, then it gets cut, and demand grows, and other supply increases. It's just this very intricate system, and it's done by people like you and me on an individual basis, making choices. Am I going to go to this store or that store? When I go to that store, am I going to buy this thing or that thing? All those decisions that are happening around the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. All those individual decisions go into this global economy. And the COVID response just hit that with a machete and just chopped it apart. And that intricate flow was completely interrupted. And government attempted to manage it from top down. And it's been a disaster. If people would be left alone,
they'll work it out.
That economy will rebuild itself. It will. But to the extent that we're trying to force it, with the Inflation Reduction Act. There's an article in the paper about the Inflation Reduction. That's a ridiculous name, because it's the Inflation Act is what it is. Right? It's the Inflation Act. It's an attempt to intervene to control something that is really not controllable. You have to let all those individual decisions happen so that the economy can heal itself, and it will. It will always do that, but you have to leave it alone. And
because it's many different ways of fixing it.
Many different.
And the federal government doesn't look at all of them.
No, they only look at one. They look at one, and it's one that's going to have a political motive behind it.
Right.
So they claim they're trying to fix an economy. What they're trying to do is stay in power. And so they're making decisions that will let them stay in power, and hopefully they can persuade people we're really trying to save the economy. It's not going to happen. They're meddling with it. And so the advantage that Republicans have, and I think people need to think back and look back at history, is that as Republicans like to let go and let the people control their own lives, we see an economy flourish. So one of the things that I want to do, and I think every Republican that I know who's running this fall, whether it's on a national level or here in the state, is to take steps to allow that economy to grow, to let people make those decisions so this economy grows.
I think here in New Hampshire, that's what we do generally.
Yes.
And I think that's more likely to happen here first than the other places. I think the people are oriented it that way. Let us work it out. We
Right.
work it out much better than you guys do.
Well, it can happen that way, depending on how people vote.
Right.
It can happen the way you're describing, or it can go the other way. And my fear in New Hampshire is that it could go the other way. One of the reasons I'm running is because I want to make sure it doesn't head
Right.
to the socialists. Look what's going on in New England, all around us. You got Massachusetts, and you got Connecticut, Vermont. They're all heading towards the socialist model. We're not doing that here yet, but we're surrounded by it. We're influenced by it. And I think there's our Democrat government here in the state, the Democrats, well, we don't have a Democrat government in the state, but locally, and those who would like to be in Concord want to make us look like the rest of these states and make it more centrally controlled, more like a socialist state.
Well, David, we're running out of time, but I want to let the people know that the Republicans are having their monthly meeting next Wednesday in the Marriott, and if anybody wants to come and hear about what they have, get the voters out. We want to have a good election. We want to have people who are going to follow those ideas of freedom, of being able to let people live their own life.
Great.
Okay.
Hope they come
I
out.
hope you make it and be
Thank you
one
very
of
much,
those
Kyle.
that are.
We'll talk
directing
again.
it. Okay.
Great to be
well,
here.
Thank you very much.